For today's project, I stepped out of the studio and headed outdoors. I tested my workshop in a box, which we built in our last video. In that video, I packed my most essential tools and materials into the Sailrite carrying case to create a portable sewing station. Now, I don't know about you, but my home workshop is in a cold basement with ceilings barely taller than I am. And my Sailrite studio is spacious, but doesn't have any windows and usually has about 100 different projects going on at once. So it can be a little chaotic. So having a change of scenery and still being able to do what I love, which is making stuff, was really a nice change of pace. So drop a like on this video so we can keep doing more outdoor projects. I unpacked my case and wound a bobbin by hand for the first time, which wasn't bad at all. And now I know it might seem a little silly to have an all-metal, heavy-duty sewing machine in a portable setup. And yeah, it does add some weight, but for camping, van life, boat trips, or even just working on your back porch, it's totally worth the extra pounds to have machine sewing capability. Someday I might build an even smaller portable workshop with just hand sewing tools, but for now, I'm enjoying having my Ultrafeed along for the ride. I found a really nice picnic bench, and it's a beautiful day, the sun's out, we've got a nice breeze. My machine is threaded, so I'm ready to start making. I won't need my power cord or foot pedal because we're sewing outside today. And the project that I want to make is actually similar to this bag right here. I made this maybe a week or so ago, and I'm making a drawstring, but with a twist. So what I want to make today is called a drop pouch, and it's a leather compartment that has a drawstring bag inside of it, and that bag can fold up and store away when you don't need it. Or if you ever need a pouch for any reason, you just undo the snaps and the bag falls out so you can use it. And I've seen people use it from everything from getting kindling wood for a fire, I've seen dog treats, ammunition, you name it. Cool rocks. It's kind of a just utility all-purpose pocket, so I'm gonna try to make one of those today with wax canvas and leather. I brought 3 leathers with me today, and I'll figure out what I wanna use, as well as 3 colors of wax canvas. So I've got tan, black, and natural with me. But being outdoors, I think I'm gonna go with natural just because that seems to make sense. But to give it a little bit of extra color and to speed up that patina process, I'm gonna put some of this oil on it, put it in the sun, and let the sun do its thing. I like to do this to all my natural veg tan when possible because as undyed leather patinas, it often goes through an awkward phase where it looks a bit dirty or gray before it starts actually looking good. This process skips that phase and helps the leather develop a richer, more beautiful look over time. Gonna go find a good spot in the sun for this to get a nice tan while I work on the pouch. Some might call this cheating the patina process. I call it optimization. I do have a simple template for the leather parts of this project. I don't have any template for the drawstring bag part of it, but I do know that I want my final drawstring bag to be about 8 by 12 inches. And so I need to cut my fabric to a final width of 17 by 13 and a half. And I'm cutting this along the fold, so I'm going to cut that 17-inch measurement in half to make it 8 1/2 inches. I used my acrylic ruler as a square, but it wasn't long enough for that 13.5-inch cut, so I paired it with my longer metal ruler. I squared the acrylic ruler against the fabric, then butted the metal ruler up to that, removed the acrylic, and made the cut along the metal edge. The next cuts were 2 angled corners along the long edges of the panel. I removed 7/8 of an inch of fabric at a 45-degree angle. Then I used my scratch awl to score 2 lines to fold a double hem. I don't want any exposed edges here since this is where the cord exits the bag. There will be a lot of friction in this area and unfinished edges would fray over time. I brought 2 packs of needles with me, one for leather and one for canvas, so I'm going to throw on the fabric needle and start sewing this bag. Sewing this way really makes you deliberate about every stitch since you have complete control over when the needle hits the fabric. Sure, it's a bit slower without power, but the stitch quality didn't suffer at all. In fact, since I couldn't rush through it, the craftsmanship and attention to detail might even be a bit better than usual. And the stitches are looking great. Back stitching is a little bit tricky since I can't hold the reverse lever and pull the crank at the same time, but I could just rotate it 180 degrees and I back tacked that way. After sewing both corners, the next step is to fold a hem on that same long edge of the fabric. So this is a double hem. My first fold was 3/8 of an inch and my second fold was 1 inch. You want this to be pretty wide so that the cord, rope, line, whatever you're using has some space in between there. And so there's enough fabric that it can gather when you pull the drawstring bag taut. So now I'll go sew it. And to save myself some headache later, I'm gonna go ahead and put the cord in the channel so that I don't have to fish it through later on. I know I've got some clips in this Notions bag to keep everything secure as I sew. Sewing without power, hand cranking the monster balance wheel is surprisingly smooth. Other than back stitching, I actually really enjoy this. So with the top part done, I'll fold it so that the right sides touch, and then sew the remaining 2 sides closed, turn it right side out. Here's a good example of how I locked in my stitches. When I reached the end, I turned the workpiece 180 degrees, rolled the fabric through the throat of the machine as needed, and continued sewing forward to lock in the seam. Now I'll trim off this corner, turn it right side out, and that's pretty much all it takes to make a drawstring. I can use my burnisher to press out these corners, and it should be a nice tight corner since we trimmed off that little bit of material. So all that's left is to add the cord lock and trim the cord to length. I used a 3/16 inch double barrel cord lock with some 1/8 inch braided cord that has a nice pop of color with the orange threads. I found that it helps if the cord is just slightly smaller than the barrel, so it moves freely when you compress the spring. To finish the ends, I melted them with a lighter and tied a knot. So we're all done with the drawstring. Let's check on the leather, make sure the squirrels didn't steal it, and then go finish up the project. Looks pretty nice, has a little bit more of a warm color to it than the plain natural earlier, so should look really nice with the navy wax canvas. So this pattern is pretty simple. It's just a long strip of leather and then a second piece for the belt loop, and it's gonna fold up kind of like this, and the pouch is gonna have to be folded up inside of that. It'll all make sense in just a second. It's pretty simple, but let's cut out our pieces. And the way I'm making do without all my fancy rulers is I'm using my acrylic ruler to set the 4-inch line, and then all I've got to do is move that ruler out the way, and I've got a perfect 4 inches right there. I only had to cut 2 basic shapes for this pattern. And to clean up the look, I added a corner radius, beveled the edges, and burnished them to a nice shine. And I'm not going to burnish this bottom part quite yet, because if you look on my template here, it says wait till the end to punch these 2 holes, because I might need to trim a little bit of excess material off there depending on how big I made my bag and how big you make your bag. So wait till the end before you punch the holes on the bottom side of your pattern. Then I marked the holes on the top of the main panel and laid out the position of the belt loop piece. Before I attached it, I used my wing divider to mark the stitch lines. The top of the loop will be sewn only to the main leather panel, while the bottom will have 2 rows of stitching attached to both the main panel and the canvas pouch. I held it in place with basting tape and started sewing. making sure my back stitches looked clean since I'm using a contrasting thread that really stands out against this light leather. The last step before attaching the pouch was installing the snaps. I put the button and socket pieces on the top part of the panel, but you could install the eyelets and stud pieces here instead. It just depends on how you want the flaps to come together. I'll demonstrate both options later in the video. Sewing the pouch to the leather was the only tricky part of this project. I had to be careful to stitch through just one layer of the waxed canvas. And since it's a stiff material, it's a bit tricky to keep the second layer out of the way. I used some clips and aligned the top pouch so that the top edge lined up with the top edge of the belt loop piece. Then all that was left was to fold it all together and find the best position for the remaining snap pieces. Since my pouch is twice as wide as the leather, I can tri-fold the pouch and it will be flush with the leather on both sides. So, fold it nice and snug depending on the size of your bag. As you see, there was a bit of extra length, so I eyeballed where the snap should go and then used my template again to space them apart correctly. And I'll know I need to trim about that much off. I trimmed away that excess leather, finished the edges, and installed the snaps. So there it is, we're all done. It's got the belt loop on the back. I'll put it on my belt in just a second. You can see how that looks. There is one decision you can make when installing these snaps. I find it a little bit easier to undo when it's this way, but if you need it to be a little bit more waterproof, you could go the opposite direction as well. So whatever you choose, both work well. But you open up the snaps, the bag folds out, and you've got yourself a pouch. Fill it up with whatever you need to, cinch it tight, and then when you're done, since it's wax canvas, it's going to remember that shape, and you just fold it just like it was, and then snap it closed. With the project finished, I packed everything up, put on the lid, and headed back to Sailrite. I really enjoyed working outside today, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like to support the channel, and stay tuned for our next project in the outdoor series.